Fantastic. Well, welcome along, everyone. It's great to have you at today's webinar. If you don't mind, can you just click down at the chat box and tell us where you are and what's the weather like there today? So today's webinar is called Taking the Next Step. So using web meetings to engage remotely with our MLA clients. So thanks to all those who filled out the pre-event survey, because that has really helped guide my presentation today, so that I'm hopefully answering the questions that you were looking for. So the way I've broken it up is we're trying to get through a lot of things, and today is the advanced session. So we're talking about designing an online session versus a face-to-face workshop, then engaging with your attendees. We're going to talk about breakout rooms, and so you can experience it again too. We'll then look at hardware and software very briefly, because we covered that in the introductory one. And we'll talk about online collaboration documents. And at the end, I'll pause for questions where you can ask me anything. So folks, I'd love you to use Poll Everywhere again today. So if you just pop over to your Google search on your phone, the phone works best. Just type in POLLEV and do a quick search on that. So that's your first step there. Then the second step is just tap on Poll Everywhere, and then you'll see it bringing up a nice little screen like the one here at step 3, and then you just have to type in MM Forum, as in the M&Ms, which are a bit like Smarties. So what I'd like you to do now is, can you tell us where you're joining from today? So I can get a good picture, because there's about 30 of us today, and I wasn't quite sure where everyone's coming from. So if you can type your response, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm seeing quite a few from Southern Australia there, and I can see over in the chat box as well that we've got wow, such a variety of peoples. Yeah, so Tassie, Geelong, Wagga Wagga, yep. Yes, and it has been a bit cold of late, hasn't it, folks? So that's kind of why I chose to wear the Hawaiian shirt today. So excellent, thank you for that. So let's just move on. So hey, as you're probably familiar, so now that you've used Poll Everywhere, this is where you can ask further questions. So if I don't quite cover something, so don't start typing things in yet, wait till I've had a chance to present some things. So for instance, I'm going to be talking about moving from face-to-face workshop delivery to online face-to-face delivery. So as I go through the material, if there's further questions, then pop them over on Poll Everywhere. That'd be great. Okay, so this came up in discussion about, well, how do you convert from a traditional workshop into an online one? So I've prepared this nice little table here, which I think the take-home message is they're pretty much the same. So if I were running a face-to-face workshop, I'd work out an agenda, I'd send out an invitation, I'd do heaps of preparation. I would welcome people on the day, and by that I mean as they walk into the room, I'd greet them and welcome them along. And so that's what I did today. I was waving at people when you were there, and that's why I like to have the webcams on, because it just gives that bit of more personal connection. We can do introductions. So today you've already told me where you are and what the weather is like, and boy, hasn't that cold change come through quickly. We've got some ironbark trees behind our house here, and a big one was blown over last night in the wind. Actually, not blown over, it was snapped halfway up the trunk. It was so strong. We can do ground rules. So today I said, hey, let's have so you don't always have to have written ground rules. So today I verbally said, hey, let's have our webcams on. And then I said, hey, let's turn them off. So that's just an example of a ground rule. And similarly for the questions today, instead of the chat box, because wow, if I had 100 people here today, I couldn't choose which questions to answer at the end, was, hey, with Poll Everywhere, it just makes it easy. So those are some examples of ground rules that you can use in your online delivery. Then traditionally we have content blocks, and then you get people to apply them, generally in small groups, and you might have, 2 or maybe 3 of those. Then you have some conclusions and where to from here, and then you wrap up the meeting, and then of course you'd often do some follow-up. And I snuck this one at the end here. You can see the faces. So, that's why up the top here I said a traditional face-to-face workshop versus an online face-to-face workshop. Because folks, I could be, looking right at the camera now saying, hi folks, how are you? And you get to see my face. So it is still face-to-face. So it's all about our mindset. And I think that as we engage with our clients, we need to not make too big a deal about, oh, it's online, it's scary, it's different. It's, hey, just like we met face-to-face last time, we're going to meet face-to-face, but on a Zoom meeting. But of course, there are some key differences. So the top three for me are you need to amplify your own energy levels as a presenter. So if I was talking with you, face to face at a coffee shop today, I wouldn't be using this, a little bit excited voice and having greater tonal intonation like a good radio announcer. But at a webinar, you need to lift the energy of the group because it does have a tendency to go downwards. So that's why I like to be a little bit excited. You also need to be more directive. So if you're at a face-to-face workshop, you might say, okay, so we've covered that section. Does everyone get that? Any questions? Whereas if you do that in an online environment, there's deathly silence. And then suddenly, 6 or 7 people will try to talk over each other. So then no one wants to talk. So it's actually better to work down the list and say, okay, I'm looking at the participants list now, which we all see, and I'll work down and ask, or you might just pick up a few people from the audience and say, hey, Bob, I'll unmute you now. How's this going for you? Has this covered what you were looking for this section of the workshop? So you need to direct your questions and comments to individuals. You also need to use shorter segments. So in a face-to-face workshop, you'd often go for 20, maybe 30 minutes before pivoting and just doing something a bit different because, people's attention span isn't that long. Folks, the bad news is online, it's even shorter. So I suggest every 10 minutes, you need to be doing something different. So by something different, I mean, you could do a poll and then discuss those results. You could get people to turn all their cameras back on and have a bit of a group discussion, or you could use breakout rooms, and we'll talk about that in a moment. You also could use flipped learning at both a traditional event and an online one, of course, and we covered this a bit last time, but in the earlier webinars, I didn't have this simple table, so let me just quickly run through it. So with flipped learning, so a traditional approach is that so let's talk about our farmers. So let's not use students today. So let's talk about farmers. So traditionally they'd come to, a 2 or 3 day workshop. We'd fill their heads full of good information, and then they go back to their farm where they would apply the information and would, master it as such. However, that's just when they want us there. So, if it was about soil erosion or some other exciting topic that you're delivering, when they go back to the farm, they think, oh, so that contour bank, should it have been from there over to this part of my property? Or, oh, should it be along this line here? Whereas in a flipped learning approach, we would send them some fact sheets, maybe some short videos, maybe just an audio recording of you talking for 10 minutes about a particular topic, so they can go over that material as many times as they need to become familiar with it. And of course, they're more comfortable back at their farm, maybe sitting at their kitchen table going through this material, rather than sitting in a classroom with their arms folded, hopefully not in straight rows. I hope you don't do that to people, but sometimes that happens. So it's an uncomfortable environment for them. So it's easier to learn when people are comfortable. So then they can come to our workshops, and instead of them being 2 or 3 days long, maybe they could just be a half day or a 1 day, where we say, okay, so let's discuss, you read those fact sheets and you listen to this. So here are some questions for us to discuss. So here's a picture of, a slight slope. Where do you think we'd be putting these contour banks? And so you can help them apply and master the new information. And the beauty of that is that it means that your events can be a lot shorter. So here's a real life example. So this is a workshop that was due to be run face-to-face at Armidale, actually. And it was to be a 5-hour face-to-face workshop, but because of coronavirus, it was postponed at the last minute. And they turned to me saying, hey, John, can we now deliver this online? And I said, sure, but let's try to keep it to an hour. And they kind of laughed and said, no, it's 5 hours, it's a 5-hour workshop. and they'd engaged a facilitator who was adamant it had to be 5 hours. So I went through the program with them. And so this is the actual program on the left. I've kind of just taken out a lot of the words, but these are the actual times and materials that they are covering. And this is how I flipped it into essentially a 1-hour meeting. Admittedly, it did go 10 minutes late, but that wasn't too bad. So what I did was that I talked through the presenter and the facilitator saying, okay, so tell me particularly about the group discussions and things like that. And we found ways of doing them online and particularly beforehand. So at the beginning, there was this 20-minute slot for the researcher to present their key findings. So I asked them to do a 10-minute video, which they are able to do. They condensed all that into 10 minutes and they then recorded that and they put it up on YouTube and they sent the link to people, 1 or 2 weeks before the event so that everyone heard those key findings. Then we looked at what some of these discussion sessions were going to be that they were engaging the group members for. And so I then helped them, well, actually, I developed a web survey for them using SurveyMonkey, but they helped design the questions. So we sent out this pre-event survey, again, 1 or 2 weeks beforehand, where we gathered their views. So we asked them essentially the questions that they were going to discuss in the face-to-face group. And it was like, it wasn't a long survey, maybe 10 questions, lots of open-ended questions though. But it meant that when we came to the online session, we were able to give a short welcome and introductions, and we gave a short summary of their views from the web survey, which was much faster than them giving them to us at a face-to-face workshop, as you can imagine. We then clarified any key questions that came out of that for them, and that only took 10 minutes. And we then moved on and developed the strategic actions which mirrored this World Cafe down here. So instead of the World Cafe, is, small round tables like in a cafe, and you have a sheet of butcher's paper and you get people to basically brainstorm a list of ideas on that, and then they move to the next table and add their ideas to these existing ones. We couldn't quite mirror that in the online environment, but we did use Zoom breakout rooms, which were highly successful. And we gave each Zoom group, and I shouldn't call it that, it's a Zoom breakout. So each breakout group had its own little topic, and we gave them a link to an online document where each group then recorded their ideas. So the report back was dead easy, and they then gave a little summary in the chat box as well, which meant we could have essentially finished at 11 o'clock. I did mention we went 10 minutes over. It was because the introductions, because there were like 30 people there. And unfortunately, the facilitator who was really running the event, I was just in the background looking after the tech, they invited people to unmute themselves and introduce themselves one by one. And you can imagine, wow, so we lost time, a lot of time there, probably 15 minutes that I then had to gain through the thing. And of course, we finished with a post-event survey, and the survey said it was a highly successful event. And a lot of people appreciated the fact, now no offense here, Ange, but they appreciated not having to travel to Armidale. So folks, that's a real life example of how I did it. So if you've got some questions, feel free to add them into Poll Everywhere. Okay, so at this stage, I need to just pop over here. That's good. Okay, so one of the really important things is being able to engage with our audience. And the reason that this is so important is that Zoom is becoming one of the most frequently used ways of meetings today. So I'd like you to guess, how many attendees do you think now join a Zoom meeting each day? So in a day, how many attendees do you think that are at Zoom meetings? Great, and I can see that most people most people are responding well there, and it's nice that Zoom tells me that 71% of you voted, so I'll close it off in 3, 2, 1, and I'll share those results. Interesting. A bit of a bell curve, around 30 million. You think, wow, isn't that a lot of people? Can you just imagine how many that is in your mind? I'm going to tell you the actual answer right now. So let's move on and I'll reveal it in just a moment. Oh, and before I do, just a little techie tip for you. Did you notice in the bottom right-hand corner here, I had this thing here called polls? So that was to remind me that I needed to run a poll on that slide. So that's just a little prompt that I use for myself, because otherwise sometimes you embed polls and you just forget to actually launch them. Otherwise, what I do is I create a slide in my PowerPoint presentation that just has the word poll. But I thought that one was a little bit more discreet. So folks, a number of you told me in the pre-event survey you wanted to know about creating a poll. It's as easy as this. You log into your Zoom account and you click on your meeting, and then towards the bottom, there's this little dialog box. And all you need to do, so this is where you can create the registration process and add extra questions and that sort of thing. You've got email settings, branding if you want to have logos. So all you have to do is click on poll, and you just go click add, and then you're able to get this little pop-up box here. So this is the unpopulated one on the left, and this is the one on the right. So you give it a name. The participants don't see the name. They see the question, and then it can either be a single choice response, so you had to choose one of those four, or it could have been multiple choice. So you could have selected 1 and maybe 10 for a different type of question. So dead easy. And then as the host, this is the toolbar that I get to see on my screen. And all I had to do was click polls. And because I have multiple polls, I then had to come down and select the one that said Zoom numbers as the nickname that I'd given it. And then I go launch polling. So it's just, it's a really easy way of getting feedback. The other way of getting feedback is if you now just click on your participants icon at the bottom of your screen, or at the top, wherever it is, you'll see that there's a yes, no, go slow, go fast. So can you let me know, how is my speed for you today? Unfortunately, if you're happy with the speed I'm going, can you just say yes? But if you want me to go slower, can you let me know? And if you want me to go faster, can you let me know? Excellent. So I wish I could share this with you, but I'll just describe to you. So over the top of yes, I've now got the number 7, and over the number and over the icon go faster, I've got 2. So that's letting me know that, yeah, most people are happy with the way I'm going, but I just need to keep moving. So I'll do that. So the answer to the question actually was there's 300 million attendees at Zoom meetings each day. So this is just released about 2 weeks ago. So very fresh data for you, but that's just letting you know how many people are now using Zoom. And you think that's fantastic, isn't it? But folks, have you heard of Zoom fatigue? So this is actually a picture of my friendly Toowoomba beekeepers. So for the first time ever, they ran a Zoom meeting, and this guy Dennis is kind of typical of the age range involved. So generally 75 and not out, happily retired, and has some beehives. So most of them were unfamiliar with the Zoom technology. I'm pretty sure it was the first Zoom meeting many of them had attended. But folks, for most of us, I'll often do 3 or 4 Zoom meetings back to back. And there's this thing called Zoom fatigue that I'm sure that you too have now experienced. I came across this quote just 2 days ago. The only thing worse than meetings are virtual meetings. So if you think that is true, can you again go to the bottom of your participants list? And is it yes or no? So do you agree with that the only thing worse than meetings are virtual meetings? Okay, yep, fairly even there. So 5-4, and yeah, so it's 5-4. 5 yes, and well, it's actually now 6 no. That's okay. You get the idea. So the way around it is it comes back to the host. We need to engage early and often. Like, there's nothing worse than being lectured at in it by someone with a monotonous voice, and as a participant, you become very disengaged. So this is where I like to use visual hand signs. So like even at the beginning of today's meeting, for those that joined early, I said, hey, can you just raise your hand if you can hear me? So that engaged you. It also gave me some very valuable feedback that my headset was working. We can use the chat box, and we've done that already today. We can use polls, and we've done that, and we've done the Zoom emoticon. So those are ways of engaging with your audience. And folks, this is a key thing, that it is a radio interview style, and this came out in the introductory webinar. So what you need to do is you need to speak confidently and engage the audience with an interesting, dynamic voice. So personally, I went to Toastmasters a few years ago because I wasn't quite happy with the way that I presented, and they gave me lots of tips and tricks that I now use today. I suggest that if you're wanting to have notes to guide you, that you only use bullet points and not a script. I was on a webinar just the other day, and there were 13 or 1400 people, and unfortunately the main presenter read from a script, and you knew they were reading from a script. It just didn't go down well. And I suggest that you talk, you then pause and engage, so that and that gives variety for the audience. And so again, that comes back to that 10-minute slots that I was mentioning before. And of course, the way you design your slides. So particularly in an online environment, you need them to be simple and clean. So if you don't need a graphic, such as my slide here, don't use a graphic. But I do prefer pictures over words, because the problem with words, and I demonstrated this in the intro webinar, people read ahead and they then don't listen to you. So I prefer to just have a picture and just one or two words, and admittedly the words are more prompts for me as to what I'm going to be covering. And keep them guessing. So that way they're tuned in and you're raising their curiosity. And my guideline is a new slide every minute. So I think today I've got 54 slides. And you can be as informal as you like. I was at Tim's webinar just recently, and it was great the way that he engaged with his participants. And I just clicked on the participants list at the bottom there, because it was in the slide, but of course that's not where I want it to be. So Tim isn't with us today. That's a shame, because he did really well. So it was the first webinar that he ran with his sheep producers, and there are a lot of these young guys sitting on their couches, typically with a can of beer in their hands. And it was really relaxed and engaging. He had Ken Solly along, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And it was a really nice, engaging, informal discussion. So he set the tone, and I thought he did a great job of that. So again, are there any questions? So I'll actually pause now and I'll come over. So the first question, and I'll just check that sometimes I embed the poll everywhere, but I didn't today. So I'll just pause and I'll look at the poll everywhere on my phone, and I can see, can you poll on the run, or do you have to prepare polls prior? You can do both. I prefer to prepare them beforehand, but if I wished, I could click now. If I was really good at multitasking, which I'm not, I could click on the little polls icon and I could create a new one on the fly. How do you charge for this? So that's about the online workshops, I'm guessing. Well, it's the same. People value what you present, but we can spend more time on that at the end if you wish. Let's see. So let's talk about scheduling a meeting. So I know for some of you, you said in the pre-event survey, you hadn't actually run one, you weren't quite sure how to do it. So it's as easy as this. And there's different ways of doing it, but I just prefer to log in to my Zoom account on the zoom.us website. I click on meetings, and then I enter a topic for the meeting and a bit of a description. I can use a template if I've got logos and that sort of thing. And I just need to choose the date and the time, the duration of 1 hour. But of course, if it goes over an hour, it doesn't stop. It's more a guide for the attendees to know how long it's going to be. And of course, the time zone. And make sure that when you have a new Zoom account, you change the time zone to your local one, because otherwise it'll be in New York or something similar. And then when you come to send the invitations, Zoom has a pop-up box which you can just copy that meeting information. And what I do is I copy and add that to my calendar meeting invitation. So either Outlook or Gmail, whichever one I'm using. The beauty of that is I can type a message, a personalized message saying, hi, let's get together to talk about the opportunity of whatever it is. And then I say, please use the Zoom login details below. All the best, John. And then I just paste in the Zoom details. And the beauty of that is that the attendees will then get a pop-up message from, if they accept your invitation, they'll then get a pop-up reminder in their calendar as well. So here we are. So this is a picture of a workshop I ran just last year. And, you know, typically we had a lectern up the front. We had a presenter who shared some good information, and I'd arranged people in small tables. And of course, after about half an hour, we got people to do some group activities. Well, wouldn't it be lovely if we could do that online? Because that's what, you know, helps people feel engaged. They love talking with each other in small groups because, you know, most of us don't like to appear stupid in front of a large group, whereas you could ask, you know, questions like that in a smaller group. Well, the good news is you can do that online. They're called Zoom breakout rooms. I mentioned this in the intro one, but I didn't have this slide, I don't think. And so it's the number of breakout rooms. So it's you'll see that you can have 20 breakout rooms of up to 500 participants if your license allows that. So today I've only got a license for 100. So I could have 20 breakout rooms with up to 100 participants, all up. And you can see you can have 30 with 400, 50 with 200. So I doubt that you would be wanting to have more than that in your meeting. So if you do the multiplication, it's 10,000 people, and I'm never going to have a webinar like that. So I love breakout rooms because it gives the opportunity to for the participants to get to meet other people who maybe they haven't met before, and they can apply some of the learnings. So they're really easy to set up. So the trick though is you need to make sure that your Zoom settings have it enabled, because by default it's turned off. So again, you just log into zoom.us, and then you come down to your meeting details, and it's down at the bottom here under the advanced meeting options, and it's here, breakout room. So you need to just slide the little toggle to turn it on, and then you can also allow host to assign participants to breakout rooms when scheduling. So if I had a group of producers and I wanted, say, a facilitator in each group, and I wanted to organize who was going to be in what meeting, if I get the attendees to register for the event beforehand, it means that, you know, maybe 1 or 2 hours before, I could go in and I could actually create the rooms, and I could shuffle the people between them. And it's very easy to do. And then during the meeting, all you need to do is click on this little icon on your toolbar for the breakout rooms. And then you get this pop-up box. So it's assign this number of participants into this number of rooms. So today we've got 22 people. And so on my screen in a moment, it'll say, it'll be assign 22 into one room, or would it be assign 11 into 2 rooms? It does the maths for you, which is really nice. And then you create the rooms, and then you can also have options here for how long they go. And you can see what's happening. You can see who's going into each room before you actually click for it to happen. So this is one I just ran yesterday with Desiree. And so I could see who was in the different rooms. And when they were in the rooms, it was you can always broadcast a message, but it's a short message. I was in another webinar the other day, and they tried to share a long message, but all we got was like the first sentence. So that didn't work so well. But it can show you who's going in, and you can close the rooms. And as the host, you can join. So if this was displaying on my computer, so I could have clicked on this one here, and I could have jumped in, and I could have been chatting with Desiree and Karen. So in the same way, at a face-to-face event, like a live one, in person, shall I say, I would be walking around the small group saying, oh, is everything going okay? Do you understand the question? Well, you can do that with the Zoom breakout rooms as well. It's just nice and easy. And just a little techie tip, when the people are in the breakout rooms, there's a little ask for help icon that they can click on, And as the host, you'll get this message saying, hey, this group here in Breakout Room is asking for help. And you can just click on that, join the Breakout Room, and you'll be transported in there. So it's nice and easy. So hey folks, let's do it, because it's a lovely thing to do, and it gives you the opportunity to experience it. And what I'd like you to do is, once you get into the rooms, is to quickly introduce yourselves and talk about how is your web meeting journey going. So how are you going as a webinar host? How's that going for you? Have you had a go? Have you had some good experiences? Have you had some learnings? So let's share those amongst the rooms. And we don't have a lot of time today, but I will close. So Zoom gives me the option that I can close the rooms, and I'm going to say after 3 minutes. It's just a taste, folks, and you will get a countdown timer is the word, after 30 seconds, so you'll know it's about to happen. So folks, enjoy your discussions. You'll get a little pop-up thing on your screen in just a moment saying that you're being invited to join whichever room. So off you go, and I hope you enjoy the experience. Oh, and remember to unmute yourselves and to turn on your videos. Hey folks, welcome back. So in the chat box, can you just tell us, how was that for you? Great. Okay, so getting lots of positive responses there. And of course, the beauty of the chat box is, I don't have to read them out. You can read them there too. And folks, if you could just turn off your webcams again, just saves bandwidth for those who are in deficient areas. Okay, so if you've got any questions about that, feel free to pop over to Poll Everywhere, and I'll try to cover those at the end. I covered equipment in the earlier webinar, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I will mention that I've had lots of questions the last few days. People can't buy headsets, particularly the Sennheiser one. To me, anything that you plug into your computer, even this $10 one, is going to be better than the mic that's built into your laptop computer. So just find something that you can plug in, and it's going to be better. And when this pandemic's all over, then you can upgrade and get the really nice stuff. But at the moment, anything is actually better than the mic on your laptop. But even then, if that's the best you've got, well, use it. And just try to improve it over time. You don't have to aim for perfection. Let's just get things happening. But a reminder, the thing that irritates attendees most is the poor audio quality. So let's talk about managing limited bandwidth, because that also came up in the pre-event survey. So here are my tips. So test beforehand, see what your bandwidth is like. And so if you're going to be delivering an event at a place that is not familiar to you, make sure that you get there, early and see what it's like. And you might either tune into the Wi-Fi of the venue, or it may be better to use your mobile data, because you might have a better reception with that. So test and just see what works. I love starting webinars and finishing them with the videos on, but my preference is to turn them off. And I think, and I know that reduces the bandwidth, and I think it makes people feel a little bit more comfortable too, that they don't feel that they're being stared at the entire time. A reminder that people can easily swap over to a telephone connection. So all they have to do is click on the little icon down here, the audio one, and third from the bottom is switch to the phone audio. And when you do that, you'll get a list of phone numbers displayed. So then they can use their mobile phone or their landline to do that. And as a presenter, avoid moving animations. So, into PowerPoints, just have things landing, just appearing on the slide. Don't have them being like a flying toaster doing several somersaults to then land on the page. We've talked about webcams, and again, you just need to do it. Even today, I have this little post-it note next to my webcam, so that at the beginning I was doing my best to look up there. Unfortunately, sometimes as the host, you're having to do things on the keyboard, but I have a post-it note there reminding me to look at it because otherwise people will see my shiny baldy head, which is not pleasant. A reminder, lighting is important. I've bought one of these LEDs selfie rings myself. I found the battery only lasted for about 20 to 30 minutes though. So I now have a Lume Cube, which goes for several hours. But again, find something that works for you. Anything is better than working in a dark cave where the people can't see your face. I mentioned the green screen in the previous webinars, but people have been contacting me saying, oh, they're all sold out. You can't get them. Well, the next best thing is actually this, a green sheet that you could buy, you know, just at Kmart or wherever, or just a simple white sheet. So Zoom is actually really clever, and that you don't, when you choose your virtual background by going down here, you don't always need to have a green screen behind you. So if you've got a fairly plain white wall, you could try doing that yourself. And so when it comes to choosing a background like today, because it's so cold here and as it is across most of Australia, I thought I'd go for the Hawaiian shirt and the beach scene. Zoom has built-in ones. I prefer usually just to go for a plain black one because it's less distracting. But again, it's up to you. But I do like them, and they just help it to look more professional. There's nothing worse than someone running a web meeting, this has happened to me, from their bedroom, and you can see their dirty laundry on the floor behind them. To me, that's just not very professional. Okay, so software we've covered, and wow, Zoom is the popular one. I've mentioned before that there's the free option, which is so good at the moment because they've made it's untimed. So now is a great time to get in and try using it. And at the early webinars, people asked, oh, what's the difference between the Zoom meeting and the Zoom webinar? So a standard meeting goes up to 100 people, but you can pay extra and get up to 1,000 participants. And with a webinar, you can have 10,000 attendees if you so desire. They both allow registration, and you can create series so that you could have a meeting every week or every month or however you like. They both have chat, although I have found that the chat in the meeting is much more interactive than in a webinar. And it may be the way the webinar people lock it down that attendees are not allowed to chat to each other. You can only ask a question of the panelist. They both allow the polling. It's the meeting that's got those cute little emoticons at the moment. They both have reporting. The webinar has the practice room, but you can still kind of do that in a meeting beforehand. And it's only the webinar that has the Q&A function. You just have to use the chat box in a meeting. But this is the important one for me, that it's Zoom meeting that has breakout rooms. You don't get that in webinars, and I just love that feature. So again, if there's anything about the hardware or software, type it over into our poll, and I'll try to cover that at the end. Now, some of you asked, hey, we'd like to use online collaboration documents so that the attendees of our meetings can work together during the webinar. So folks, this is the way I do it. So I prefer to use Google products. If you're a Microsoft person, then you can easily translate this into how you do it with Microsoft or whatever product. So for me, I just go to my Drive and I click on New, and then my document has a share button up the top here. Then this is where it gets tricky. So when you click on that share button, it comes up with this list here, and I've made the mistake myself once before where I just ticked the first option here saying, yeah, edit, because I saw it in bold, can edit. I didn't read anyone enablers have changed. So within my organization can edit it. So what you need to do is click on the more option, and then under more, you can click on anyone with the link. And if that's not good enough, there's one final step, and that is that down here for access, the default is that they can view it. You want them to be able to edit it. So that's what you then need to do there. And then you save it, and then you can send the link. So again, a little ticky tip. This is the link from the document that I have created already. And so I could send that to people, but I don't know, is that like 100 characters long? So I just popped over to Bitly, and because I've been running some livestock advisor updates and PGS webinars, I just use this little shorthand here, which would be familiar to you as my participants. So instead of typing all that in, I could say, hey, why don't you just type that in, and you'll be able to then see that document. And what I need to do now, though, is I'm going to click over on my Google Doc already, and I'm just now going to go into the chat box, which of course has disappeared, and I'm going to send the long link to you, but you can see what that's like. And I think that if you click on that, that should take you in. Anyway, if you could someone could click on that. If I was even more prepared today, I would have had that short one that I could have sent to you. Anyway, moving on quickly. So folks, that I've covered the questions that were asked in the pre-event survey, and I've deliberately left about a quarter of an hour now for questions. And you all know my contact details. I'll be emailing you afterwards. So if you have other questions, feel free to follow up. But otherwise, there was this one question that you wanted answered today. So make sure you do that. But what I would like to demonstrate actually is if you can, so let's see, can someone in the chat box let me know, were you able to get to that document, the shared document? Okay, so let me very quickly, so this is a good example of what sometimes happens in webinars, that it's not quite working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause my sharing, and I'm going to go to my PowerPoint slide, which you only know that I'm doing because I'm telling you that. And so I could be talking about how cold the weather is and that sort of thing, but I am secretly going back to my PowerPoint presentation without you being able to see that. And then I'm coming back and I'm going to find the it's hard trying to do this multitasking, folks. So now I come back to the chat box, and this time I'm going to send a chat to everyone in the meeting, and lo and behold, here is the URL that you need to go to. So folks, can we just pop over to this at the moment? So if you can open that on your screens. So here's an example of how you could use the shared document to get information back from your participants. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share that page over here. So we're now all seeing that, and I should see if I can just change the view there a little bit. So make it full screen. There we go. So hopefully that's big enough on your screen. Can you just type in for me now, what new things did you learn today? And what thing are you going to do as a result of what you learnt? So if you answer those questions, I will be over at Poll Everywhere, and I'll be preparing my quick answers for your the questions that you've asked over there. So how's that? Shared responsibility. And just so that you're aware, back in the good old days, you could have a clickable link in the chat box, but for security reasons, Zoom has stopped doing that because it could have taken you to a spoofing site or something like that. So yes, it's true. You need to click and copy the link from your chat box and paste it into a new tab in your web browser. Great.